Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hello, and welcome to Undiscovered Gems. I'm Charles Smith, I'm your host, and today we have Paul Bekman. You've heard from Paul before, and so have I. Paul is a diamond of the decade. He's a lawyer out of Baltimore, Maryland. We're going to hear a lot about what he's done to get started, what he's done today, and issues he might see that are facing his industry tomorrow. Paul, how are you? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Charles. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So, Paul, it's great to have you back on the show. Why don't we just get right into it? Because you know this show goes very fast with people like you who have a lot of information to share. So, Paul, start off by telling us a little bit about your background.
So I'm a practicing lawyer in Baltimore, Maryland. I am a trial lawyer. I'm somebody who spends a lot of time in court. A lot of times lawyers of all different types spend their time in the office, but my time is in litigation, and I'm one of those lawyers who is actively trying cases. And that leads us into the whole issue of how does a client pick a lawyer?
There you have it.
And it's very important. You know, you can't go anywhere these days, no matter whether you're in New York, in Baltimore, in Florida, in Pennsylvania. You see advertisements, you see billboards, you see programs telling the public that contact this lawyer or contact that lawyer, and this is the person you need to contact. But in my experience of having tried many hundreds of cases, jury trials, it's very important that you know the capability of the lawyer that you select. And I'm not talking about a fender bender. I'm talking about a serious case where people may be injured. My practice is personal injury of serious catastrophic cases, whether they be auto, truck, plane, whether they be medical malpractice, defective products, where you are involved with serious injuries or, God forbid, death. And it's extremely important for the client to make sure that they have the right lawyer for the right case. And that means doing a little work. It's not what they may say to you in their advertisement or their billboard. It's what is their experience, what are their abilities to handle the kind of case that you have. And there are a number of ways to go about finding that out. For example, has the lawyer that you're going to meet with and you're going to talk to face tried a case? Have they tried a case similar to what your case is about? What has been their success rate?
Right.
Can you give me, Mr. Lawyer, the name of a client that you represented in a case like this that I could talk to about you? And I will tell you, I have no hesitation whatsoever doing that. What is the lawyer's experience in terms of what they have achieved? And that may be something as simple as checking out what verdicts they have obtained, to also check out what organizations they may have qualified to be in, and there are a lot of those. We've had nationally an organization called Best Lawyers in America. You can't apply. You have to be nominated. They're in every possible field of law that you can imagine. And there are books that you can go to. And is this person in Best Lawyers in America? Has this lawyer been certified as a trial lawyer by somebody like the American Board of Trial Advocates, or something like the most difficult organization that you have to get into because you cannot apply is the American College of Trial Lawyers, which is limited to the top 1% of lawyers in a state. and you can't apply. You have to be nominated in order to do that. I was nominated almost 30 years ago, and I have been in it, and it is a wonderful organization of highly qualified people. And one of the nicest things is when you go to a meeting, nobody tells you how great they are. It's a lot different than a lot of other meetings.
Right, right.
So the most important thing for the prospective client is check out your lawyer, and check them out, and you will find that once you do and you take those necessary steps, you'll be in the best of hands.
Nice. So, when people select a lawyer, a lot of times, as a client, a potential client, they are looking at it from their perspective. Obviously, they're not looking at it from your perspective. It's like, what do I need? Does that lawyer match what I need? So it goes into, you got to be your own person going in. You have to know what works for you, how the lawyer communicates with you. Are you aligned with them? Do you feel like it's the right fit above and beyond the facts? So what does that mean for you as a lawyer in being your own person?
What it means, Charles, and I think this is extremely important, is you want to have the client meet you as the lawyer, face to face. We're in a world today where face to face could even be, if people are located far away, Zoom. And they can get an idea of who they're going to be represented by or not represented by. Because I think it's extremely important that the client be comfortable with the lawyer. And the lawyer will be able in a meeting to tell them about what course will be taken in their case, what has to be done, and how you should go about doing it, and what's the best way to succeed eventually. Is this the kind of a case that should be settled, or is this the kind of a case that requires a trial? And it's extremely important that the client have confidence in their lawyer. And that comes with, in my view, contact. There's an old saying about lawyers are so busy they don't return phone calls. Well, it is the biggest complaint that is probably made about lawyers, is they don't return phone calls. I go out of my way to make sure that I do. When somebody calls, they deserve a return call. And that can make a client feel very comfortable and confident that their lawyer is in contact with them, in touch with them, knows what's going on with the client, which is important to the case. And that's critical. So I think firsthand contact is critical.
Right. We often seek advice from, as a client, other people who may have had you. And you've mentioned that, look at the background of the lawyer and how you select. But more importantly, it's along the lines of advice and mentorship. I'm a client and I'm in a certain case. I might find a family member or a friend, and they might be in the background. They might come to the meeting with me because they've gone through the process that I've gone through. So do you also mentor your clients? That's part one. And part two, who mentored you and got you where you are today? And how do you pass that on to your client on how you work with them?
That's a good point. The fact of the matter is that in today's world, it's extremely difficult for a lawyer who just becomes a lawyer to get into a court and try a case. Times were different when I first became a lawyer, and not to ramble on it, but I wasn't a lawyer 30 days when the lawyers in my law firm that I work for said to me, Paul, look, you've clerked for us for 2 years. We think you could do a good job. Take these 2 cases, automobile cases, serious injuries. They're jury trials. I know you haven't had a jury trial, but you take these cases, get the experience of being in a courtroom with a judge, with a jury, and don't worry about it because these are losers. We don't expect you to win. Well, I busted my chops to prepare, get all the advice I could possibly get from them, and went in alone, tried both of the cases, and won them both. And from
Mm.
then on, Charles, I was hooked. And I think it's extremely important for a client to know that their lawyer, who really is in essence their mentor, to know that I am going to take care of you and do the best job I can, whether it's to go to trial or whether it's to go to trial and start a trial and settle, or to settle a case before the trial, because most cases are settled these days. But the really, really serious ones tend to go to trial. I was mentored by some wonderful lawyers, and I have lawyers in my law firm that I mentor that I take into court with me so they can see at least one way of how it's done. And
Mm.
I think that has been a very beneficial thing in our law firm, that everybody gets an opportunity to get into court and see how it's done.
Now you kind of took it upon yourself to maybe ask questions. You had access to the lawyers at your law firm that have given you guidance, and you went in and executed. Um, However, did they come to you at times and say, Paul, hey, let me talk to you before you go in, and you didn't ask for it, and they knew something, and then they just kind of gave you the information, pushed you along? Did that happen quite a bit?
It happens all the time because we want our lawyers to be prepared. We want them, if they have any questions about anything, come to me, come to the other lawyers in the firm. We'll be glad to sit down and talk to you. Sometimes, cases are handled in a way where the younger lawyer get the opportunity to work with you as you work the case up. There are
Hmm.
depositions, which are question and answer periods, which are under oath of key witnesses. There's discovery of answering questions, getting documents. There's investigation, and we have investigators who assist us. And in my firm, because we do a lot of medical malpractice, we have something unique. We have 3 full-time nurses working with us who have 30 years of experience in
Mm.
looking at records, evaluating records, creating a chronology as to what happened, a timeline, which will show us exactly what took place or what didn't take place and what should have taken place in the care of the patient. And we have found that to be extremely valuable because of the facts, that the ability of the nurses to assist us in evaluating, is this a viable case? Is this a winnable case? Was something done wrong? Or was this just one of those things that happens in the care of a patient that's not negligent? It's critical.
So you've mentioned that you have nurses in your office. Is that a differentiating factor? A lot of law firms do it, or is it because you have so many cases that you need their input on a consistent basis?
Well, the interesting thing about it is, and knowing a lot of the lawyers who do what I do and what my firm does, which is handle a lot of medical negligence cases, is very few of them have the kind of staff that we have. Maybe
Mm.
they'll consult with a nurse, but they're not full-time members of our staff. And that's, in my view, something that separates us from a lot of the law firms in the area. We want to know the medicine. We're lawyers. We know a lot about medicine, but we're not doctors. But these are all RNs, registered nurses. They've been trained. They've worked in the emergency room. They've worked in critical care. They've worked in the operating room, and they know what's right and what's wrong and what should be done and what shouldn't be done, and was the patient treated appropriately or not. And then from there, what we do is we then use them to assist us in getting experts in the particular field of what is involved, because it's critical, if you're going to try a medical negligence case, to have experts in the field that is involved, the same or related specialty. If it's orthopedics, if it's neurosurgery, whatever it might be, you need to get somebody in that area. And of course, over the years, we've used a lot of different people from all over the country, but it's critical to make sure you have the right assessment of the case to find out where the problem is or isn't, because we
Hmm.
don't accept every case. And most of the
Right.
cases we look at, we don't accept. So we try to be very, very careful to evaluate the case, to determine whether it's something that makes sense to bring for the benefit of the client.
Sure.
I mean, because the number one concern that we have is making sure that the client is taken care of appropriately.
Right.
And
When you look at the due diligence factor, now, Paul, you have over 40 years experience, so this question might be a little different. In my thought process, if you have a client and you're doing a malpractice case, you have your nurses on staff, you can evaluate the case. You might be able to sit just with the nurse with all your experience and evaluate the client and proceed forward with a strategy. But if I am wrong, what is it like in your office? You got a client. How do you do the due diligence and evaluate all the data that you receive to say, okay, this is how we're going to go into trial. This is how we're going to execute our strategy. How many people are in your office that go through this, and how do you go about it?
we all go through it, or try to go through it the same way. First things first, get the medical records. And in today's world, there's something around here in a lot of the hospitals called My Chart, where
Right.
the individual can get their own records. What they do is they make sure that they've got all the records, because sometimes things are missing and they don't get the whole thing. So we use this authorization called HIPAA to get all of the medical records. It's key. And Charles, sometimes, and this is hard to believe, we've had as much as 14,000 pages of medical records. Can you imagine that? And they
Wow.
go through and they go through that, and they look at everything, and they create a timeline, because the timeline becomes critical. Was something missed because, for example, a prescription was ordered of a key medical specimen that is necessary, ordered, but it wasn't filled, and the patient never got it. But the patient wouldn't have known it, but because the
Right.
patient was disabled. So was the prescription filled? And was it filled appropriately? Did they get the right dose? Did they get the wrong dose? Did they not do it? So having the quality assessment of evaluating the records is essential. Once you get that, and you know where you believe the negligence may be, or multiple areas of negligence, then you contact the physicians that have experience in that area. And we make sure that they do, because we talk to them before we hire them. And we talk to them about, here's what we have. We'd like you to take a look at it. Is this something that you have done? As opposed to, well, I've never done that. I don't want that person. I want somebody who has experience in the specific area that we're dealing with. Because if you go to a jury and the jury knows that this person has done it 50 times, that person has experience and credibility as to what's the right way to do it and what's the wrong way to do it. And that really holds true with a jury.
In today's environment, thanks for that. In today's environment, technology plays a role in just about every business. How is it touching your business? Maybe in the office, in the courtroom. You mentioned 14,000 documents. How is technology playing a role in the legal field?
Well, it's every day, and every day is intense. Intellectual property aspects of getting records, because some people like to see the paper, and some people can put it on the computer, and they like to do it. And a lot of the nurses like to do it by computer, because now in a lot of the hospitals, virtually all of them now, they're electronic medical records now. They're not handwritten anymore. You go to a computer and you enter it. So they're going to look at exactly what the records show. And yes, there may be paper copies of it that may be introduced into evidence, but you've got to focus your attention on what the key records are. But it's there every day. And the courts now, in terms of how a lawyer presents a case, we present using, intellectual property. We do it by showing the jury. And this is an interesting concept, and I'm sure that the people who may be listening today would understand it. Statistics have shown that all of us, take the 100% of the population, 75% of all of us are visual learners, but
I
25,
definitely.
and I am, and 25% are auditory. So we focus on visual and the
Mm,
presentation of exhibits, the presentation of slides, the presentation of a PowerPoint. All of that is helpful to the jury because they can see it, you can tell
mhm.
them about it, and then you can tell them about it again when you close, and they will remember it and they'll be able to take it back to the jury room. And persuasion, which is critical here, comes with converting the complex to the simple. And that's what we try to do.
Utilizing technology. That's great. When you
Absolutely.
look at your industry now, Paul, technology impacts the industry, there's changes. But what about the law? What about certain rules and regulations that might be antiquated? There might be some new things that need to be done to make the industry more efficient from the lawyer's perspective, from the client's perspective. Can you talk about that from either side for a minute?
Sure. And this is something that we live with here in our state. For example, the state of Maryland has what's called a cap, a limit on non-economic damages. Non-economic damages are pain and suffering, emotional pain and suffering, physical pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life. All of that is capped. There's a limit to it. We're only one of 10 states in the United States that have that. And there's been a big effort to say if a person is in a situation where they have an injury that is a lifelong injury and they can't walk or they can't talk or they have horrendous injuries which are painful and will be with them for the rest of their life, is it fair to them as individuals that their damages are limited? It is not fair. We're surrounded by states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, even the District of Columbia, New Jersey, New York, no caps. Virginia doesn't have caps in other than medical negligence cases. And it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference if you know that you can be limited to what damages you can recover. And it's a
Hmm.
big problem. So where do we go? Well, we have to go to the legislature. The legislature passes the law, the state legislature. There have been attempts federally to do it, but it hasn't been successful, fortunately. But we have it here. And that's one of the big, big problems in helping people who are critically injured or hurt or have resulted in so serious an injury that it causes death. That's one of the biggest impediments to fair and just compensation for the individual who is injured. A
Mm,
big problem.
got it. Paul, talk a little bit about your expertise. You mentioned malpractice. What are your two expertise that you work on, and what do you possibly come across where you might need another law firm that to come in and or another lawyer to come in with their expertise to help out?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I've tried a lot of medical negligence cases, a number of product liability cases, but I also have handled a lot of cases under what's called the maritime law. The
Mm,
maritime law is the law of the sea. Once you get offshore, uh, you can be in territorial waters where you can be on the high seas. The maritime law applies. Just recently, people may have heard about the fact that a ship left Baltimore Harbor and ran into the Key Bridge, which spanned
Uh,
the area here, and 6 people were killed. Fortunately, this was at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there were 6 workers who were on board the bridge who unfortunately passed away. Several of them were in cars. Had that happened during the day, it would have been one of the worst injuries of magnitude you couldn't even believe. 35,000 cars a day go over the Key Bridge. So, for example, for some lawyers, and I get these calls, Charles, on maritime law, because I've been doing it my entire practice. Maritime law is a unique area. So people will call me, Paul, I've got this maritime case. Let me tell you about it. Can you help me? Can you direct me? And that happens a lot. So there are always areas where certain lawyers are specialists with regard to certain areas of the law. We're dealing now with a very, very horrendous situation here in Maryland involving abuse through the Archdiocese of Baltimore, who there were over 600 cases that were filed, and
wow.
the Archdiocese came in and has filed for bankruptcy. So all of those cases are being litigated in the bankruptcy area. And when you're dealing with an area that's specialized like this, dealing with people, children, minors, even adults who have been abused, it requires a special handling. And people here in my office, all of us have done that. It's unique. Unfortunately, in our world today, we have to live with that because it goes on everywhere. But, like every firm, a lot of firms specialize in different types of areas where, for example, there are airplane crashes. And you may want to deal with people who are pilots.
Sure.
You may have issues dealing with, ships, engine department, pilots, captains of vessel. All of that requires specialty. And we try to make sure that if we need help, we go to the experts who deal with it. But for the provisions of handling the case, we're able to handle it. We just make sure we get the right experts.
Great. Paul, again, we're winding down the time. I got to give you an opportunity to talk to the audience and kind of leave them with a couple nuggets, understanding your practice, what you do, and how you can serve them.
So here's what I would say to you all who are listening. As I said in the beginning, and as Charles had asked, make sure that you get to the right lawyer, whatever your problem may be, and make sure that that lawyer has the experience and has achieved the results that would be necessary for you to select them as your lawyer. And it's easy to do with what exists today in the world of Google, in the world of IT, and what will happen in the world of AI. You can find out a lot about the person. Meet your lawyer, meet your prospective lawyer in person or by Zoom or in some way where you can communicate so that you can be comfortable in the selection of the lawyer for you.
Got it. Paul, this is why you're the Diamond of the Decade. Thank you for coming on Undiscovered Gems and dropping a lot of gems on the audience, as you always do. Good to see you again, Paul. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Charles. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.